For a long time I've found black to be quite a boring colour to paint. It works well as a spot colour to offset the others, but it doesn't really draw much attention on its own. I just find it quite bland and backgroundy. Well, today I'm going to challenge myself to paint black and enjoy it, whether I like it or not, damn it. Alright, and welcome back to Don't Think Just Paint. I'm always on the lookout for my next unfinished dopamine project, and I decided to start some dark elves. Well, Holo Miniatures had my back. They were kind enough to send over some sculpts. They've been some of my favourite elf minis for ages now, so much so that even before the channel started I bought myself a load of their dark elves, and then last year they sent me over some wood elves to work with. Go check out that video, it was a really fun project and I definitely plan to do more, so watch out for that. So huge shout out to Holo Miniatures and go check them out on my mini factory. Go grab some elves and tell them I sent you. I printed out some obsidian guard and did a couple of test schemes here. I did this teal and gold that I was really tempted by. Then I did this white and kind of plum red colour. I really liked that one, and I was drawn to it because white is not typically a colour that dark elves are associated with. However, something was kind of bugging me about it, and then I realised, oh yeah, literally everything I do is white, red and yellowy gold, and I need to break out of that habit, I think. I'm not addicted, I don't have a problem. So to avoid these looking like my wood elves, I decided to go for something else. I decided that since black and red was so traditional and so unappealing to me, maybe I'd challenge myself to make that interesting. So here I am, painting an army in its traditional and intended colours. I feel dirty. When designing a colour scheme, my advice is always to start with the basic dudes, get your main colours, and then you can do the fancier stuff from there. Yeah, I did not do that. Obsidian Guard are top tier, and these Warlock Riders are spooky weirdos that ride around with no armour. Let's just pretend for 1 second I'm not the most organised of people, shall we? So I'm going to get the bulk of this done with some speed paint techniques. I start from a mid-grey base tone and then dry brush up to a white on all those details, just to pick up all those details, get some extra highlighting in early on. I don't start from black because I feel like it desaturates the colours too much and creates less interest. Everything is kind of harder to highlight up from there. For extra fun, start from some weird saturated colours. They'll make the colours you put over them interact in weird funky ways and give the shadows different tones based on what colour you used. It's awesome. Next, I use contrast paints to pick out some colours. Now, I know you thought you'd clicked on the wrong channel when I did some prep beforehand, but don't worry. This is every bit as haphazard as it was before. I didn't really plan ahead where the red and the black was going to be, so I'm just kind of picking things out and hoping for the best. I start with Flesh Tearers Red, picking out the bits that are going to be red and trying to leave a lot of areas for some black. You may notice that I use Flesh Tearers Red for every red tone, even when it's going to be quite a lot lighter, and there is a reason for this, and that's mainly because it's the only one I have and I'm too lazy to go out and get more. But also I do quite like it when you start from a much lower tone, you can then highlight up and you get a lot more depth rather than going from a base of that mid-red. Next, there are a few leathery bits, and my other colour is going to be a warm gold. I use Gorgon to fur for both of these because it's just good to get two parts with one colour if you can. Both of them are going to go to that dark brown in the recesses, so good to save time there. Finally, onto the main event, the black. And I'm starting here with Basilicanum Grey. The reason being that I don't want to take it all the way down to the black tones. I feel like we'll get interest by creating more interplay between colours here. Also, Basilicanum Grey is quite a dark grey anyway, it's a very strong pigment, so it gets us most of the way there. At this point I realised that the layers hadn't properly come through on the print of the cape. Well, that's what happens when you print in January in the UK and you're not careful about temperature, folks. Okay then, this is the main experiment, so let's try some stuff. I'm going to do a few washes of different colours using purple, red and green for the most part. Since they're mostly transparent, they won't fully colour it, but they will kind of shift it into different tones. In other videos, I've started with this kind of shade tone, throwing on a load of regular paints to create those undertones that I'll then paint over. What I do is pick a warm side and a cold side and then kind of mix the colours around between them to create interesting interplay between colours underneath. This is kind of similar to that, just from the other direction. So I've started with my colours and now I'm shading into some weirder colours. So I choose a general direction for purple, a general one for red, which is kind of in between, and then I choose green for the upper and left-hand side. From there, I'm just going to start slopping on a load of these shades. I'm not being too careful about where things go, and I'm not waiting for anything to dry. I'm just making sure they don't pull too much, spreading things around with just a big fat brush, and filling up the whole model. I'm also not too careful about hitting the other colours. I actually kind of like this. This is why we do it at this stage, because everything's still quite dark. When we highlight up, we might get some of those other purples and greens on the other colours, and that's going to create some cool visual interest anyway. You'll notice for the horse I left this out as I was doing the blacks. I was planning to use different shades so the fur gets a little bit different colouring, but actually I'm going to do a unifying wash anyway, so I think instead I'm just going to use the same colours here and then my unifying wash will be a bit different for the horse. While I'm here with the purple shade out, I'm going to throw this all over the Warlock Rider's skin. This is a really good way to shade pale, pallid skin, and these guys are from like the cold, wintry north, so they're definitely going to be pale. I mean, they also ride around practically naked, so they probably have frostbite like everywhere. Let's not worry too much about that. Now it's time to get some of these finished up colours where I want them, and I'm going to start with gold. I use Dragon's Gold here, leaving brown in the recesses. This works quite nicely as a shade, making the bright and shiny metallics really stand out. I follow this up with glistening gold, picking out the edges and the most prominent areas. Next is the red, and for this I'm just using Hellspawn Red. I use a silver paint on the blades, and at this point I'm pretty happy with the colouring so far. Now to unify the colours a little bit. I use Oblivion Black Wash on all the black parts and the silver parts of the blade. The idea here is that obviously I've created a weird mishmash of colours, and now I can make the recesses look basically black and tone down the other colours and have them be super subtle. And this is where I get different colouring on Mr. Horsey. I use Battle Mod Wash, which is brown, but really desaturated and kind of close to black anyway, so the hope is that the horse will look basically black, but with a bit of natural colouring. Those gold parts aren't really standing out so much, so I grab Raglan Flesh Shade. This is a super warm and saturated shade, and it's going to draw the different elements of the gold together and make it more distinct from the black around it. Now, I want to boost the definition of the black areas, but this is where not planning ahead has kind of come back to haunt me. I use medium sea grey in more like a glaze fashion. In case you're new to painting, glazes are so thinned down that they only tint the surface, and they can be used over multiple consecutive layers to create really smooth blends and transitions, or just change the colour very subtly. The reason I had to do this is because I don't want to trample over the weird mix of colours I have and make everything back to a boring grey. For the most part, I'm managing to make it work, but as I go, I've realised that if I'd done this in a different order, i.e. I'd done all the highlighting and edge highlighting before shading it back down, I would probably have kept it quite neat and also got those highlights in with that weird colour combo. Well, that's what I get for being me, I guess. Well, I'll do it on the rest of the unit. I am running out of time before this video needs to go out, so I don't have time to do it now, but check out my Instagram, keep an eye out, and I'll post the finished ones there. A similar thing applies to the horse, which was highlighted with a mix of leather brown and medium sea grey, just to get in those more natural tones. Okay, lessons learned there, but it's looking cool anyway. So now I'll move on to the finishing touches. Using basic skin tone, I highlight up the Warlock skin, then Orange Fire for the red parts. I use Trooper White for some of the highest values for the skin and the hair on the Warlock, and finally I use Thinned Vampire Fang to create scratchy highlights for the leather, and that's the main paint job done. I base the minis, and here we go. Man, it is always cool to see a paint scheme come together, and red and black are classic bad guy colours for a reason. Keep an eye on my other socials for the progress of this army, and once again thank you to Holo Minis for sending them over. If you want to see them in use in a game in the near future, then head over to the other channel, Don't Think Just Charge, where we will probably be using them in a one-page rules battle report sometime soon. As always, thank you so much for your interaction here, on the Discord, on Instagram. It really helps if you just press all those buttons down the bottom, do a like, do a subscribe, do a comment, tell me what you want to see next, and maybe it will happen. Oh, but